Hello, this is Father Bill Watson, and this is a question for our YouTube channel, Ask Father Bill. And the question today is, what is at the heart of Ignatian spirituality and the spiritual exercises? It's a good question. A good friend of mine, Jesuit, patristic scholar, Father Brian Daly, wrote an article nearly 30 years ago where he recalls being asked this question by his new spiritual director. Brian said, I rummaged furiously in my mind trying to think of what might be the least stupid thing to say on the basis of my very limited experience, and finally answered, the third degree of humility, I suppose. He nodded and didn't seem to disagree with me. Joseph Dagobert, for instance, whose spirituality of the Society of Jesus was regarded by many in the years before Vatican II as the most balanced and comprehensive synthesis of the Ignatian approach to life of faith, states that, quote, from the exercises a trait has come to the Jesuits, characteristic of their founder, of the union of a chivalrous enthusiasm for Christ with the sound and realistic power of judgment. Dagobert continues, the Jesuits owe to the exercises two other features of their interior life. The first place given to the examination of conscience, which we promote at Sacred Story Institute, general and particular, and above all, the importance given to mental prayer. Second, the general orientation which they give these examens and this prayer. It suffices to note the fact that in the exercises, these examens and meditations or contemplations never appear as an end in themselves. Instead, they are always seen as a means to dispose the soul, to free it from disordered passions, and to place it fully under the influence of the supernatural light, and by means of this light to make it capable of finding, embracing, and carrying out as far as possible God's will concerning the soul. This too was to become the most important function assigned to prayer in the spiritual tradition of the Jesuits. And here is where humility and discernment converge. Let's note the three kinds of humility St. Ignatius identifies in the spiritual exercises, a series of reflections that he places ahead of a decision to follow Christ. The first manner of humility is necessary for eternal salvation. It's called first humility. Namely, that I so lower and so humble myself, so much as is possible for me, that in everything I obey the law of God, so that even if they made me Lord of all the created things in this world, nor for my own temporal life, I would not be in a deliberation about breaking a commandment, whether divine or human, which binds me under mortal sin. That's powerful. Second humility is more perfect than the first. Namely, if I find myself at such a stage that I do not want and feel no inclination to have riches rather than poverty, to want honor rather than dishonor, to desire a long life rather than a short life, the service of God our Lord and the salvation of my soul being equal, and so not for all creation, nor because they would take away my life would I be in deliberation about committing a venial sin. Wow. I should pay attention to this more often. The third degree of humility is the most perfect, Ignatius says, namely when, including the first and the second, and the praise and glory of the divine majesty being equal, in order to imitate and be made more actually like Christ our Lord, I want and I choose poverty with Christ poor rather than riches, humiliations with Christ replete with it rather than honors, and desire to be rated as worthless and a fool for Christ, who was first held as such, rather than wise or prudent in this world. Dagobert points out that when peace came to the church and martyrdom ceased to be part of the prospects habitually entertained by the mass of Christians, they sought some proof of love which would be lofty enough to replace martyrdom as the highest term of their spiritual ascent. This was known to have been the starting point for all the doctrinal development about the unbloody martyrdom of asceticism in religious life. The third degree of humility, choosing poverty and humiliation to be with Christ. In this form of burning charity, there is a driving force and intense love for Christ, their leader, and the unique mediator who will carry them into the very bosom of the Holy Trinity. From this love will be born the insatiable desire to serve, to give oneself, and to sacrifice oneself for Him, our crucified King, as well as the tender and unwearied effort for the souls whom He loved and redeemed. So St. Ignatius places this consideration on the third degree of humility ahead of an election, a decision to follow Christ, so that we would be overcome with love and desire to be fully united with Christ in this life and for His reconciling work to make all things new by His life, passion, death, and resurrection. And I hope that helps.